All right. So you're going to listen to Pete A. Turner. Take him for what it's all worth. Listen to him and get to know the people that he knows, because they're interesting.
Lions Rock Productions.
This is Jay Moore.
This is Greg Cruz.
This is Bryce
This
Vine.
is Dexter from The Offspring.
This is Nathan
This
East.
is Sebastian Younger.
This is Daryl
This is Stuart Copeland.
This is Mick Gillette.
This is Andy Summit.
This is Dr. Bob Greenberg.
This is Gabby Reese.
This is Rob Bell.
Hey, this is John Leon Guerrero.
Hey, and this is Pete A. Turner.
This is Rob Nair.
And this is Jim D. Felice, and you are watching the Break It Down show.
Hi, I'm Nick Cotroneo.
And I'm Maki Pyrah, and you're watching the Break It Down show.
Yeah, I've got an interesting show for everybody today. We've had a lot of talk about the Guard being in DC, where they're sleeping, what they're doing, what their job is. And we're fortunate enough to have Julia and Nick on the show. They've written a book called Guardians, and you can get that book on Amazon. We'll talk a little bit about that, but also specifically about Julia's experience being deployed as a Guard member in DC during the unrest that we've experienced in the last calendar year or so. So I thought we'd start out, Julia, because you've done this a couple of times. You've deployed. Is your job in any way in the military linked to riot control, crowd control, or any of that kind of thing? What is your normal job in the military?
Well, normally in the Air Guards, I'm in the Air National Guard. I'm on the airfield doing airfield management stuff. So, maintaining the airfield, nothing like riot control. So this summer was my first taste of that.
So when you go out to do your Air Force job, it has nothing to do with working on crowd control or dealing with protests that turn into riots and that kind of thing.
No, this is all new to us completely. I mean, that's generally what security would do, but when they needed the numbers, they called all hands on deck, so everybody was there.
We have these perceptions that when the Guard goes somewhere, that they come ready to kill Americans. The reality, as we know, is far from truth. There are so many different legal pathways that have to be satisfied, and I always say this out loud, but I want to continue to say this so we understand this. To take put you in an American city with rounds and a permissive rule of engagement, that just never happens. That's just not even legally possible, is it?
No, and just for clarification, I personally did not have a gun or anything like that during the summer at all. Nobody was armed. This past time was a little bit different, but nobody was during our time.
Yeah, and that kind of goes to the point. Like, just because the National Guard shows up somewhere, it doesn't mean that they're armed with ammo and a permissive rule of engagement, list. And rules of engagement for the audience is, what does it take? Like, if someone throws a rock and hits you in the helmet, are you allowed to do something in response? And what would that be? And how do you escalate from, shouting to, potentially using force? These pathways are not what we perceive them to be, because when the media portrays it, they show everybody, there's tanks rolling in on railhead. Like, that actually has nothing to do with us at all. There are no tanks here in the city.
Right. We didn't have tanks. We brought some Humvees in last time. But yeah, as far as what we're allowed to do and stuff, I mean, people were throwing stuff at us, bottles of urine and bleach and you name it, talking about June again. But we are only allowed to defend ourselves. There's nothing that we're supposed to do back. We have a shield, we have a vest. We are not engaging. That's what we were told during that time.
And then you're talking about earlier this summer when we had the George Floyd riots in DC. And when I want to be clear for the audience too. When we talk about riots, we're talking about riots. We're not talking about protests. There's a clear line where having urine thrown at you is not a peaceful protest in Pete's book. You don't have to say that. You two guys can say what you want to say. If you are hurling objects at other humans, you are not being peaceful. Whether it's piss or a rock or shining laser lights in people's eyes, these aren't peaceful things. So when you folks go there in June, I guess, what would be some of the misconceptions you'd want to dispel about being deployed to an internal homeland conflict?
Well, I guess it was unlike anything I think that our group has ever done before. We were not in any of that. We weren't expected to be met with population. We were sent in there to protect the peaceful right to protest. And like you said, there is a big difference between protesting and rioting. So how the media ended up portraying it was completely different. You know, we, like you said, we were coming in there with tanks, we were taking away their rights, and what I was watching on TV versus what I saw out on the streets was completely different, which is part of the reason that I was inspired to write the book and tell the stories and get what really happened out there to the public.
Yeah, and that book is called Guardian Stories of the 2020 Civil Unrest in Washington, D.C. And this is told from Julia's point of view on the ground with the actual anecdotes. And then, of course, Nick's role kind of telling the higher level things. And I guess we haven't talked to you yet, Nick. Let's bring you into the conversation. Talk about your contribution and what you saw and experienced and learned throughout the 2020, early 2021 internal conflict.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for having us on. A coworker with Julia, and she was kind of telling us all the things that was going on during her activation. And, as a former service member, it started to speak to me just on how they were being treated. So, kind of to reference your earlier statement, this all kind of came from the George Floyd, incident, right? So protests started erupting around the country. And we talk about that in the beginning of the book. And that's part of the contribution I made, is just that background. And how did Julia how did the National Guard end up in Humvees in DC, right? How did we get there? So as she said earlier, typically they get activated, for things like the inauguration, which we just saw, and they're there just in case something happens. This time they were there because something was happening, right? There was a civil unrest. They were activated. They were put into a circumstance that was kind of out of a lot of their comfort zones, right? Put on riot gear, get a shield, get a helmet, and get thrown out into the streets and good luck. So, she was doing her day-to-day duty up there. She's reporting back to us, back here, and the things that were happening to her, the things that should never happen to a U.S. service member. And people were angry, and there was that line crossed, right? It was a protest into a riot, and it needed to be captured, because what was happening in the media was, in the very liberal side of the media, you were seeing criticism of the National Guard. Their role there was just to protect the protesters. They were there to actually enable the protesters. And that was the crazy theme behind it that nobody seemed to understand. And that's what we tried to capture in the book, was those National Guard members were there for the U.S. people, not against the U.S. people. They were there, to allow that protest to happen safely and without destroying Washington, D.C. So.
Yeah, I've got a friend who's on the D.C. Park Police. They're the guys running around with those light blue helmets, and just the amount of damage they took as a force. The broken bones, death, everything. It's shocking when you think about they were there to actually allow people to protest, and they were attacked by the thing they were there to protect.
Yeah, it's amazing, and this is great timing for this talk we're having right now, because now we're seeing, right around the inauguration, we're seeing yet another activation, and all of a sudden the National Guard's getting covered like they've never have before, and the outpouring of support has been 180 degrees out from what it was in June. And it's amazing to us. We still talk about it. We're trying to figure out how to capture it. Julie's written a couple articles for some news, or for some magazines, but being able to talk to you today, we're seeing a crazy shift in the paradigm, and it's great. We're not gonna sit here and decry the fact that people are supporting the National Guard all of a sudden, but where was that support in June? Where was the support for the National Guard allowing the protest to happen safely?
And why is it so different now?
Right.
What's the difference?
Say that part again, Julia.
Why is it so different? What is the difference this time?
In terms of your two deployments, right? The June George Floyd protest support deployment, and then the inauguration deployment. What was your level of stress going into both? And then what about your experience on the ground as you actually had to do this? And you're not even the person who, I don't, from what we talked earlier, you weren't even the person that actually had a shield and was sitting right in front of protesters. You were in another role behind that line. So kind of talk about all of that if you can.
Yeah, there's a lot of different roles that I was in. This summer, okay, so the difference, the stress level and stuff. This summer, I was not expecting it. I think that's what kind of blindsided me. I was just expecting to go in and help on the streets, however we needed to do. And we were rotating our different positions. So there were times where the hot spot was right in front of the Capitol or in front of the White House, really, in June, and then we were rotated on the streets, and we constant protesting, walking by, and people, and there were the good ones out there too that were like, thank you for being here. There were, I don't want to say everybody was nasty because that's not true. There were the extreme ones are the ones that always stand out the loudest too. Sometimes some of the stuff they said and the stuff they did was, I was just in shock. I wasn't expecting it, and I took that all really personally, I think, without even intending to. And so this time when we were activated, I think I was prepared for it. I'm like, okay, it's gonna suck. We're gonna go up there. They're gonna hate us. Whatever. Just put your boots on and go. But it was completely different. So I did do some time out on the street when it first happened. Being the DC Guard, we were the first ones in because it's obviously our city. And then as the other troops come in, then we're doing more of a logistics support role, which is where I've kind of backed off and have been doing lately. Bringing in 20,000 plus troops is not a simple process. I mean, we have planes coming in around the clock, so it's been interesting to do. But yeah, just the complete. I think I was ready for it this time, and it didn't happen. So it was.
Yeah. Yeah, it's crazy. The number I saw was 28,000, that's a division for Army terms. I mean, and for those who are, so we're doing some very loose math here, but let's say a battalion is 1,000 people, and then you put 5 battalions in a brigade, and then 5 brigades in a division, and that gets you to 30,000 people or so. So when you're looking at 28,000 people, that means that there are people who are in charge of administrative things, like getting you paid, your mail, getting you gear, getting you fed, housed. All these things have to happen. And then there's a whole lot of people pushed forward to the front of the line to go do the work of standing there, being there, and being a target for anything that comes at them. So the George Floyd side of the protest, it erupted in a way that you weren't ready for. Did you fear for your life during that time at all?
There were some moments. I think in the sense that here I was unarmed out on the street, at 3:00 in the morning, and there would be a group of 5 of us. And I mean, I wouldn't do that in my normal life. I wouldn't be downtown DC at 3:00 in the morning, unarmed, a sitting duck, really. So I think in those situations, it was a little unnerving, perhaps. Yeah, and I know that. So for an example, we had a Secret Service guy. The guys that were there the very first day, that they had it the worst on Friday and Saturday. And there was a Secret Service guy that came up to us, and he was afraid for his life that first day because bricks were flying through the air, and they were yelling, aiming at the tall guy, hit the tall guy, and that was him. And he's like, thank you so much for being here, because I don't know what we would have done if we would have made it or not. So there were definitely some people that were in the extreme conditions like that.
One of the stories Julia told in the book is about being on the bus to go pick up a bunch of the service members. And she was all by herself, no gun, no mace, nothing. And they were driving through one of the protests, and she was the only member on the bus. And as you saw a lot of the pictures of, things being set on fire, things being tipped over, she actually had to kind of duck down to hide the fact that there was a National Guard bus going through the middle of the protests. And that just spoke volumes to me. And that was one of my favorite, stories that we put in the book to show, what the scene was really like on the streets there for the National Guard members. As we talk about in the book, the DEA, the FBI, some of those folks were armed, and they were always there to back up. But there were times when she was alone at 3 a.m., like she said, on the streets of DC, just kind of left to fend for herself in a uniform, which makes her a target. So it was very interesting to have that happen, in our nation's capital.
I want to speak clearly, and so people can understand what we're talking about here. This is in the United States of America, where other Americans are throwing bricks at other people and randomly trying to harm and kill people. I mean, ma'am, if you throw a brick, you intend to kill someone in my book. Maybe you don't, maybe you do, but you're not looking after their well-being. And when you get off of so now let me create another scenario. This is to give you an idea what this is like. When you get off the plane on the military air base in Kuwait, and you go to the civilian airport, or the other way from the civilian airport to the military base, you go on a bus, and they draw all the curtains so that nobody can see into the bus because there are service members on there, and we would never want them to be targeted. You have the same fear in DC. And
right. And we oftentimes we weren't allowed to wear our uniforms, on those transits.
Yeah.
And we were guard, so.
And we were told the same thing. Don't wear your uniform in and out of DC, because there actually was an assault on a woman at a grocery store close to the inner city during that time. What else there was another one too, where when they were telling us don't eat the pizza, there's glass being baked into the crust now and stuff. All these different stories you're hearing, and on these riots, or not riots, these protests, they said, they're providing pizza for the National Guardsmen, and then it's just substantially different, it's great, but it's just so different.
So that's another image we have in the book. There's a Utah National Guard gets kicked out of a hotel in downtown DC by the mayor because of the optic. So, street eating pizza, and it's got glass in it because they knew they were delivering it to a National Guard member. Now, fast forward to January of 2021, and thank goodness for this. I'm not saying it's not a good thing, but now there's GoFundMe pages to feed the troops who are in parking garages, and it's just amazing. The 1-8, it's completely, like, things have completely changed, and all of a sudden the National Guard are a bunch of heroes, and how dare we put them in a parking garage? She was in the same parking garage in June. Exactly.
Literally the same parking garage?
Correct.
Well, and the funny thing is, I think it's all just about how the media is portraying it. This is completely controlled by the media and how we are coming across to the general public. They're, either we're helping them, we're supporting their agenda, or we're not. And so that's kind of what sets a whole tone for all of this, I do believe.
It makes me really mad, and it's pushing my host skills to the limit to not just start cursing. I mean, again,
so we're both from Minnesota, and Senator from Minnesota, Amy Klobuchar, you probably know that name.
Yeah.
A couple days ago, and my mom sent me this article, and she denounced the fact that the troops were in the parking garage. And as being in the military, a warm parking garage after standing on our feet, it's fine. Yeah. We're okay with that.
Where was the denouncement when people were baking glass into the pizza that you were getting? Where was the denouncement when the mayor is kicking you out of accommodations? Yeah, we'll sleep on the ground. I've said ants and stuff's crawling to my mouth because I was sleeping, but I was happy to get sleep on the gravel in the dirt. At one point, my bed was someone's chest of drawers, basically. Like, it was laid down flat, and I had to sleep above the ground. I mean, I've slept in some horrible places. That's not a problem. I mean, if you think that's hard for us, you just don't know the military folks. What is hard is going to your home country and having bricks thrown at you, piss thrown at you, have glass baked into your pizza, have the local government do that, and then flip around 180. I mean, I think it's great that you guys are getting support, and you guys deserve that, of course, because it's a hard mission. But shame on my peers in the media for doing this. We should be reporting accurately what's going on, and calling the George Floyd riots. And then when there were protests, great, call it a protest. I don't think anyone has a problem with a protest. I have a problem with people purposely baking glass into their pizza. Like, why is that establishment even open anymore? Why is that not someone who's in jail for attempted murder? It's shocking to me. Glass in pizza.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a good one.
Okay, so you slept in the same parking garages when you were there this time. I mean, look, you're in the Air Force, Julia, right? It's not usually not that hard. You guys usually get pretty nice accommodations, but I don't want to speak for you. What is it? Have you had to sleep outside very much in your career?
No, a little bit. It just depends on the mission. I went through SEER school, sleeping on a mountain in Maine. So I was prior Navy. There's been some times in there. But yeah, it is what it is. I was happy to be in the parking garage this past time because it was nice and heated. I mean, it was kind of nice. But yeah, I mean, it would have been nicer to not, we were fine with that. It's just a surprise to me that was where the outrage was. I'm like, we're fine, we're good. But
yeah, where was the outrage in the summer when you guys were being assaulted? Let's talk a little bit about the rules of engagement in both cases. How clear were the rules of engagement? And then importantly, and I don't want to put you on the spot, so if you can't answer this, don't answer it. It's one thing to be given a rule of engagement. It's another thing to have clear ideas on what that means and what where the commander is at. Because I've watched the commander weigh it, career versus allowance. Like, am I going to smash this person or not? And it literally comes down to these things sometimes. So, how clear was your rule of engagement, and how would you describe it in terms of your ability to defend yourself? We're not talking about attacking anybody. We're talking about defending yourself.
Well, I mean, and that was a brief, and the clarity of the brief was, if you are in harm's way, you are allowed to defend yourself to the minimal amount of damage. Just protect yourself first, but no, do not engage if you don't.
Let me jump in here. Protect yourself first. How realistic is that, though? I mean, if you started to defend yourself, were you afraid that you might erupt some kind of greater level of violence against you guys? I mean, how reasonable is defend yourself with how you guys were set up in both cases? I mean, nothing really happened this time with the inauguration, so let's focus on George Floyd where the violence actually happened. But how realistic is it to defend yourself in that situation?
Well, each situation is a little bit different, and it's so hard to tell because everything was so unpredictable. I did have a situation where I was definitely verbally assaulted nonstop. And the guys I was with, thankfully I was with the DEA guys, they were armed and they're not afraid of getting dirty. Yet we as military, we have a professionalism where don't engage, be stoic, don't respond, don't react to it no matter what they're saying to you. And so that's quite a test. And finally, the guy that was with me had enough of it, and he just like, get the F out of here now kind of thing. So, yeah, it's all very case by case basis, and you really just never know what you're gonna encounter because this isn't like that we really are prepared for sometimes, or we're expecting, or you don't know what to expect when you get out there, I suppose.
Yeah, and they're told to be a presence, right? They're there. Mm-hmm. They're there as a deterrent to the violence, whether or not the actual National Guard could respond now or even back then, they were all, Julia has a picture of they were all sworn in as law enforcement. So they have the ability to, detain and protect, like they said, but, you can't go up and tackle a guy for spray painting a monument. You can't, do anything to stop what they're doing. You have to be the presence, right? Stand there, be the presence, try to draw down to keep the excitement away from the whole thing. So
it's a very, very tough position to be placed into. I mean,
yeah, with this deployment, I mean, think about it, 28,000 guard from all over the country. I mean, can you talk about a bigger political, charade, I guess? And I'll say that because she can't, but every state flew in aircraft. Every state, this time brought in all their National Guard when, DC was actually burning in June and getting vandalized and things were really bad for weeks. There was a handful of states, I think we counted 12 or 13, and they were all Republican governors, and it was a couple hundred. And now we're seeing, 500 to 1,000 from each state come in. It's crazy, just the flip in mentality. And the streets have been quiet. Everything's been quiet. There's been, very rarely have you heard of anything actually going on, but yet we still have 25 to 28,000 people activated. It's just peculiar how different the response has been.
What do you make of that, Nick?
I mean, it's political, right? I mean, it's wholly political. It's the way that the FBI has approached it. They've gone after people with Facebook and videos of where was all that. I went to the inauguration 4 years ago, and I walked by burning trucks and cars as I went in there. I didn't bring my family because I knew what it was going to be like up there. And I'm a Republican, but I'm a diehard Trump supporter by any stretch of the imagination. And I would have gone to the inauguration this time had we let it, because it's history, right? It's our country's history, and I'm a patriot. But it's odd that all of a sudden, again, that what the National Guard is doing is okay, and everything in the media is so positive when everything was so negative back then. And that was really the motivation in writing the book, right? Let's get it out there that we have good people, good National Guard soldiers who are out in front of this trying to protect our nation's capital, and all they're getting is negative media bias on the whole thing. And it was so frustrating, and it added a lot of passion to our writing, because it was easy to write that story of what really happened on the streets of DC.
I mean, the fact that we're able to break news on this show, months after those protests and weeks, or not even a week after the deployment you guys just were on for the inauguration, it says a lot about the quality of the journalism that's going on. The fact that we can talk about what it was like to be you on the ground, what it was like comparing the two different, this is the same year, same city, to get this different response from the mayor. It's shocking that the media is playing such a detrimental role to our overall stability and unity. And, I support veterans. I am a veteran. I know what it means to stand there all day. And, you think about the day in the life of someone who's deployed to an American city to deal with unrest. First off, Julia's not trained for that. She's not trained at all. It's just like, here, watch this slideshow. Don't screw it up. Don't make a bad decision in a horrible moment. Allow all this chaos, but don't allow too much. Well, what's too much? Too much is too much. These unfair positions we put you all in, and then save us from hurricanes, save us from drought, save us from floods, save us all the time. You all go through I have huge respect for the Guard, the reserves, especially because, of your very unique mission, while also being a mom, having a regular job, and all these other things.
Thanks. Yeah. And we did have a little bit of riot control 101. Of course, they didn't just send us out blind. Kind of a crash course, because this isn't your normal job. So here's how we march, here's how we don't. And it was kind of funny. I actually wrote about that in humor, as the Army is training the Air Force and the differences in that. And it's very laughable sometimes, strong Army. And so, but we had, we had fun with it and learning riot control within half an hour of training, so we got it.
yeah and let me say some things that you probably can't say. Fuck that. That's bullshit. First off, we expect that yeah this is Pete saying this. So we expect these Guards people to somehow be these badass killers all the time. The reality is they all have a variety of jobs. Hardly anyone in the military does any kind of trigger pulling, and those that do probably don't get enough training at that. So the first thing is these are people's parents. These are people's sons and daughters. These are working people. And then you say, hey, we're going to send you out into this environment because we don't know what's going to happen, but you're the tool that does this thing. And then when she says, riot control 101, yeah, you literally getting a PowerPoint slide, maybe handed some gear that you don't even know how to put together or deploy properly. You're helping each other get dressed. And then you're out there just making calls live on the ground with literally no experience in a lot of the cases. And typically the people pushed furthest forward are going to be the youngest, lowest ranked people. So these are 18 to 24-year-olds that are making decisions in a chaotic situation, having never been in a position like that before. I had to say this just for the audience so they can understand what it is, the problem set that you all are dealing with and evaluating. Nick, when I paint this picture of how chaotic and how haphazard the training is, Is this a role for the guards? Should somebody else be doing this? Why are we putting these people in this position where they're clearly not being protected? We're just using them as a resource.
I would say it's absolutely a role for the guards, and we captured this kind of in Julia's experience where they asked her what size bulletproof vest she wore, and that she kind of went, I don't know, I've never put on a bulletproof vest before, but I will say it's the military. You've been in the military, it's the National Guard, and the leadership is dealt these challenges that they have to respond to. So I don't think anywhere in our book and anywhere in our commentary certainly are we criticizing the National Guard, because they get asked to do some really tough stuff, and they do their best with the timeframes they get and the resources they have. So the leadership of National Guard, I think, was very flexible in responding to both situations, and I think it's the the non-military civilians, whether it be the senators, the congressmen, or the Department of Defense civilians who put these requirements on the National Guard. Hey, go send 5,000 people into the streets of DC tonight. Go, and they're going through the best change they can, which is kind of funny to me, text messages and short notice activations, and they do the best they can with the mission they've been handed. So yeah, National Guard leadership, National Guard on the whole, I think they're asked to do a lot of different things, disaster support, disaster relief type stuff, and then stuff like this, guard the Capitol, which I think firmly fits within their role. And I talked about that in the book. Is here's the role of the National Guard, and here's what they're chartered to do, and I think all of it falls in there. It's crazy the variety of missions they might be tasked with.
Yeah, it's for sure crazy. Are they giving you guys some kind of unit citation for either of these deployments? Any kind of recognition outside of that? I mean, you deployed to a conflict zone where people were being harmed because they're throwing rocks and bottles, and if you went to Somalia and did this, it would look the same. You would be like by the way, here's your campaign ribbon.
I don't know at this time. As of right now, we're just doing our job, so there hasn't been anything, and that's okay. I mean, it is what we're supposed to do, one way or the other.
Hey Pete, if you were a betting man, which one would they get an award for?
Yeah, they would send you to Somalia, and then you'd get an award, and that's it. And then you'll just get you. It's one thing to swear to serve your country. It's another thing to have people exploit your service. And I have a real problem with that. And I don't care what side of the aisle anyone is on. If Amy Klobuchar, because you guys are from Minnesota, if she's going to take sides in this, fuck Amy Klobuchar. I'll say that right now, because this is not what you use the Guard for, is to make a political statement. And I would say the same thing to anybody who's from the House or Congress at all, because you folks are humans. And yes, it is your job. I agree, Nick, with what you're saying, but the mayor of D.C., the president of the United States, whoever it is, let's treat these people like people, and let's respect their service whenever they provide service. Let's protect them. And I mean, the only reason why a Guard member hasn't been killed in one of these stupid riots is because of luck and the fact that you have a helmet on. But I bet there's someone who's had a career-ending injury. I bet that's happened for sure. Do you know of anybody who's had their life inexorably changed through these deployments, Julia?
I don't specifically know, but I know that last summer there were 5 guys at the time that had suffered pretty serious injuries and were in the hospital from the brick throwing. And then there were the poor 2 unfortunately placed Army guys that got struck by lightning. So I don't know how they're doing now, but they're all survived, but I don't know a long-term follow-up on how everybody's doing. And then there are probably other ones out there that I don't know. And that's just speaking what happened in DC. I mean, we didn't even touch the ways that this was happening across the country. Minneapolis was burning down practically. I had friends that were deployed there too in the National Guard during this summer's riot. So yeah, across the board, I know there were a lot more.
Nick, what shocked you besides the political aspect of it in terms of the day-to-day stuff that you were getting from Julia and what you were seeing overall as you guys wrote this book called Guardians? What else came up to you to inform you?
I want to jump in real quick on the previous one about the politicization, and then I'll answer that question. I just noticed the other day, I saw a really interesting article, and it was actually a video posted by it was a junior congressman from North Carolina. He's like 25 years old, Republican, and he filmed himself giving pizzas to the National Guard in the parking garage. And so there's a video. He gets out of his van. He's actually disabled, so he's in a wheelchair, and he brings all these pizzas to the troops, and they're thanking him. And then it ends up with, a big photo op with him on the front page, on his Twitter page of him giving pizza to the troops. And that one struck me too, because you said, either political party, the politicization of this whole, National Guard deployment. So I guess that was, to segue into your question, that kind of thing was what really shocked me, is that, they were there to do a mission. Nobody in the National Guard complained about it. Nobody, said it was a stupid activation or why are we doing this? They needed to be there. And yet it just seemed like nobody outside of folks who've been in the military, who understand that mission, supported him. And it was almost like a dirty thing to talk about, that you were supporting the National Guard, you were supporting the safety of these protesters. And nobody understood that connection. Nobody understood the connection that the National Guard was there for, and I've said it, once already in interviews, National Guard was there for the people. They weren't there for the president. They weren't out there to squash the insurrection or anything like that. They were there to make sure people didn't get hurt. And that's it. And make sure that some of the monuments and, some of DC didn't get burned to the ground, or, there was another, bringing up the Utah National Guard again, I read, there was a group of them who did the night shift. And at 3 a.m. when Julia finally got on the bus to go home for the night, these guys, the same ones who got kicked out of the hotel by the mayor, were out with, brushes scrubbing the monuments clean of spray paint. And then, so they deploy all the way from Utah, come in, do that, and then they get kicked out of their hotel. I mean, give me a break. I mean, that to me is just, that's the quintessential story to why, our story needed to be told, and why we need to wake up to, how we treat the National Guard.
I was calming down for a second there, but I'm getting mad at you.
Trying to keep it interesting for you.
Well, thanks. I appreciate that. And by the way, I want to say, I'm sure Amy Klobuchar is a nice lady. I'm sure that her family loves her, and I'm sure she intends to do well. But in this particular case, I don't want to see people politicizing things. There's unrest going on. Do your damn job. Figure out how to do what. Here's the thing, right? In the legislature in general, they have a lower rating than the president and everybody else. We keep electing the same people. And then you look at, they couldn't figure out how to get any kind of stimulus or support passed for all of these people and businesses that are struggling with coronavirus and trying to get through this time. But on a dime, they can stop and impeach a president. Maybe he deserved to be impeached, but months ago, when we were all trying to, get through this time, how many people are sicker, are in way worse shape because Congress wouldn't act and wouldn't do their job because of political things. These are the things that divide us, and what it makes me angry, because all Americans deserve, to have a representative that cares about them more than their party. And that will always be the case with me. I don't care what party you're from. I don't care who's in the White House. But if the legislature is not doing their job, they're letting us all down. So vote all of those people out because they don't care about you. And I'm saying that to everybody in the U.S. All right, enough of me politicking. Let me get back to this book, Guardians. Julia, this is your second book. You didn't write it with the co-author before. Why this time?
Well, I just think it was kind of an idea put together. As I was catching up on everything that was going on back home or back in work and everything on the way up to DC, I was calling him up and he's like, "Oh my gosh, you need to write this down. These are crazy stories you need to tell." So it's kind of that inspiration, and I just started writing, and it was really, writing's kind of my therapy. So it was a way to get it all out. Plus in this time where we're locked in our houses and can't do much in the evening after work anyways. So it was really nice to be able to write it, actually. And then having another person inspire, it was really helpful, and to bounce ideas off of each other and to, critique and criticize and whatever.
So
yeah.
Julia, when she wrote her first book about herself, so it would have been hard to co-author something like that, but it was a while ago. I I finally got to read it. When we first started working together, she said I couldn't read it because it was too personal. And it's a really good book. So I'll do a little teaser for that. She talks about her life in the military and, from the day she enlisted all the way through when she decided to get out. And her storytelling ability, I was drawn to it because she's a really good storyteller. And the way that she writes it down, it's personal. It's vulnerable. She talks about things that, are uncomfortable, but are impactful. And so I was drawn to her writing style, and I've always, wanted to contribute to something. And so she actually encouraged me to, help her. And we kind of kept, like I said, using the kind of a symbiotic relationship to bring this to what we think is a pretty good story. So it was really kind of us pushing each other back and forth to come up with this final product, which I think we're quite proud of.
And Nick, this is your first book. I mean, at least I'm assuming it is. It's the only one I can see on Amazon. What made you say, or who pitched who, and then what made you guys decide yes for you, from your point of view?
So I think it was motivating her to write it all down. And I think she knew that there was something to the story. I started to contribute, and honestly, and she might disagree, but honestly, I didn't really want to be credited. I just like the experience of it all. She'll disagree and say that I wanted a part of it, but no, I really just wanted to help because I like the idea of putting things like this into publication. I like Tactical 16 was wonderful to work with. What a perfect, publisher for what we were trying to do. And so thanks to them, let Julia and I with a little bit of input, let us do our thing. And what came of it was awesome. So it was an awesome experience, not to use that word too many times, but it really was a great experience. I'm grateful for being involved because she probably could have done 95% of this without me, but she allowed me to, contribute my thoughts and words. So, and
it was helpful too, because it is kind of a time sensitive issue or story, obviously. So the quicker we could get it out, the more where it's still relevant and stuff. And it kind of fell into then this whole situation in the inauguration, complemented or contrasted. So having a co-author really helped the time element of that all. And that's where Tactical 16 was also really great with working with us and kind of fast tracking it out. It's pretty quick for a book to be published, actually.
That's awesome. There you go, Nick. I added an awesome in there for you. Yeah, well, shout out to Chris Schafer and all the good folks over at Tactical 16. They're friends of ours. This is not a paid sponsorship. It's just I care about those guys. Talk to Chris all the time and do what I can to support Tactical 16 with the show. And I guess we should clarify, too, Guardians is not necessarily about the inauguration part because you guys had written the book before then. Is that correct?
Right. Yes. We came out, it was released November 12th, so before... like the week after the election, really. But yeah, so this was all the stories of, in June, the riots in June. So that's why it's kind of fun now to be able to talk about it and talk about the differences and I don't know, it's interesting, all of it.
Let me ask Nick, because I don't think Julia can talk about this part. When you saw all of the words being said about the riots before and talking about, and by the way, let's not forget, words are violence in a lot of places, but not if the guard is standing there. All right, so property is replaceable. All these concepts, people having their businesses burned, people being murdered in their businesses and then burned to death, right? These things all happened this summer. And then you see the riot that breaks into the Capitol. Do you see much separation between those things? That level of discontent where we're seeing murder, arson, and breaking into the Capitol building, for crying out loud.
Yeah, I mean, there's a very easy parallel to draw there, right? So I would say the vast majority of people in this country saw what happened to George Floyd and disagreed. They knew that what happened, on the streets of Minnesota was wrong. In Minneapolis, it was absolutely wrong. And nobody really denied that. And I think now fast forward to January 6th, and you see people storming the Capitol and dragging Capitol Police out and hitting them with American flags and, running into the Senate chamber. And nobody thought that was okay. I mean, there was the people that were there, and I would even say some of the people that were there probably regret going in to the Capitol. There was a firm group mentality there of folks who went, oh man, the Capitol's open, let's go check it out. I think it was a big exercise in wanting to get a selfie. I don't think there was a majority of folks who were there that day wanted, to take down the US government. So, there's your parallel. There's two very easily denounced actions that have caused, civil unrest. It was easier, I think, on the second one to squash that civil unrest because the media portrayed it for what it was, and they were very forthright and honest. And had the media spent more time on the first round of protests talking about the bad things that were happening, because they were still happening, I think we would have probably had a lot shorter, cycle of unrest, because people would have realized a lot of the protests, peaceful protests that were supported were turning quickly as the sun went down into riots. And so, everybody, and we talk about this a little bit in the book, but you'll see every company, every major organization came out against George Floyd. Everybody had to make a statement denouncing what happened. And certainly that happened again on January 7th. Everybody said that was the most horrible thing that's happened, and it'll day that, will live in infamy. I don't know why they borrowed that one again, but nobody thought it was okay. Nobody thought it was okay to storm the Capitol and to, do what they did. But everybody in the media and everybody, the popular opinion was it was horrible, and it came out immediately and it came out strongly, and that really did tamp down any further unrest. So, I mean, it's stark. It's stark the difference in the reaction, and what could have been in June if had people said, this is horrible. People are burning DC. They're burning churches. They're burning, they're defacing monuments. They're trashing our nation's capital. But nobody really came out and said that.
We're trying to figure out some pretty complex problems here, right? And we're trying to deal with, defund the police is an idea. Improved police training is another idea. Modernize the police, whatever it's going to be. We have all these ideas, but if we are not going to get along, what's the point? What do we need to do? To the two of you, I guess I'm asking, what do we need to do to be more us and less them? So
it comes down to treating each other, as you'd like to be treated, right? The golden rule. And whether it's a National Guard member in uniform, whether it's a peaceful protester, holding accountable for people who break the law. The people who threw bottles of ice and, urine and bleach at the National Guard, at the FBI, at the DEA, anybody who was there to protect the nation's capital, those were lawbreakers. And the people who stormed the Capitol were lawbreakers. And, hold people accountable for breaking the law. And when they're not breaking the law, treat them like they deserve to be treated. And it goes right to the equality message. It goes to the systematic racism, and treat people like you'd want to be treated, and treat each other fairly and justly and with respect. And as long as we do that, both sides of the aisle, both sides of the political parties, we're a great country, and we're going to be fine. We're going to work through these issues, but it's the division that's driven by hate and by people, not peacefully agreeing or not respectfully agreeing or disagreeing with each other. And that's that debate we can't have anymore, because you'll get canceled if you say something one way, and if you don't agree with somebody else's, you get turned off. So.
And I think the media keeps that division alive. that's how they get ratings and numbers. They want us to be divided as a country. And when it comes down to it, I even wrote about this a little bit, that I think we all want the same goal. We all want, life, liberty, and justice. all the good stuff. But everybody wants to grow up in a safe country and to have success for their children and happiness. So can't argue with that. How do we get that together, and how do we cut out the middleman that keeps trying to divide it?
My first day of flight school in the Navy was on September 12th or September 11th. Sorry. That was the day I checked into September 11th, 2001.
Yeah.
Yeah, I checked into flight school. And so, I often think of September 12th, right? What our country was like on that day. We were so unified. and so, lockstep with each other on what our priorities and goals were. And, Julia was in service at the same time. That feeling of national unity in the wake of a complete crisis, it was something that, needs to be captured, in some shape or form moving forward in our country. We need to have that unity and that, that single purpose to be, the country that we can be. And having that, this isn't the first time the military has been disrespected. My grandfather served in the Army for 30 years, and he tells a story about when he came home for his father's funeral from Vietnam and being spit on while he was in his uniform. And, he told me those stories when I was growing up and, joining the service. I know that the military isn't always the most popular thing with everybody, but having that, pride in your own country, the flag, the national anthem, we can go down that road, but just having that pride for your country, I think it's important. And I think it's something that, we lose from time to time because there's this division, sewn into us.
Julia, I wanted to ask you, so you've deployed twice, once, during the George Floyd riots and protests, and then now during the inauguration. Has your unit's training schedule changed at all to reflect this new reality, or do you see these as being one-time things and you don't expect to have to deploy like this anytime soon?
No, it's constantly evolving as the missions are constantly evolving as well. Maybe 2 years ago, we were training for possible chemical warfare or something. We were planning for the tension in North Korea or something. We had people. Our unit went to South Korea to deploy, and now the missions are different with whatever the current events are, and that is reflected in the training that we often receive. And not just in like the physical riot training, but now there's like the mental training as well, like how do we deal with these situations and stuff. And we had a little bit of a debrief of that when we came back last summer, and so I would suspect that we might incorporate more of that after this one, and lessons learned along the way and what can we do better for next time. And because it will continue to evolve, I'm sure, as the world does.
Do you think you'll continue to stay in the Guard, or are you thinking like this may not be worth it now?
So, I don't know. No, it's been great. There's good, bad, and ugly, right, to everything. And I've, as much as it's been difficult on the family and myself, happy to be a part of it too, in the same token, because it's historical and I've learned so much. I kind of love that I had that inside perspective and that I can bring that to the world as much as possible. Now I am kind of getting old and stuff, so I don't know how long I'll be around, but it's funny to like be on the streets with these guys that I could be their mother, and we're going on 24 hours of duty and they're like, what's the problem? So I don't know. We'll see where life takes you, right?
And then, Nick, what about you? Do you see Julia's unit deploying to another civil unrest kind of situation, or something where they anticipate so much unrest they deploy a damn division to a small town like DC? Because let's be honest, DC, not that big.
Right? No, it's not. And I think I stated it earlier that the fact that they put a division there is purely political. There was no reason for it. And, part of her feedback to me is there's nothing going on. There's nothing going on up there. January 6th happened and that's it. We're done. We're moving on as a country. We've got a new president. I think, and I hope that's the end of it. We've always, we tend to be surprised sometimes what happens and evolves, where we were last year at this time and how much the world has changed. So I would say that they're standing ready to do their job. And, you touched on it a little bit, but one of the fascinating things to me about the National Guard is they have day jobs, they have lives, and they get called in from all over the country, and they're brought in to do a mission. And sometimes that mission isn't perfectly aligned with their skill set. And so it is amazing. And one of the things that's interested me most about being a part of this is to unpack that idea of, a suburban mom with 3 kids who puts on riot gear and stands in front of angry people, verbally assaulting and, physically assaulting others. And it's fascinating how that mission works. And it really is what makes, certainly our story interesting.
And that mom may have a Black Lives Matter and a Biden Harris sign on their front yard.
Absolutely.
That happened a lot. I mean, we're very all over the board. We're DC Guard, and we have, beliefs from all over the side. So that's the thing that was so crazy about it. That's what the public doesn't understand. I feel like mostly it doesn't matter who our president is. We have to support who's ever our commander in chief at the time.
So if we want to go down that road with the vetting thing, that incensed me, the whole idea of the FBI vetting all the service members who are been activated for this inauguration activation. So a couple of the headlines were, service members being vetted for connections to far right extremist groups and all that. And the media picked that up and they ran with it really hard. And I asked Julia, hey, what's going on with this vetting thing? And it's, she can't talk a whole lot about what goes on behind the scenes, but my impression of what I was seeing was that it's standard. Anybody who's been in the military who has a secret or above clearance, right, has a vetting process they go through. And, during those interviews that we have, you get asked questions and you answer truthfully under oath and all of the above and under, threat of perjury and all these things. And you go on, you serve your country. You raise your right hand. You don't raise your right hand to support a president, you support the country. And the fact that the media is running with this idea that we're, interviewing 28,000 people to see where they stood with their personal beliefs about the president or, the new president or the old president. I mean, that's ridiculous. It is absolutely ridiculous first of all, logistically, you can't do that, right?
Nope.
You can't activate 28,000 people and interview them all. And then second of all, the fact that they're reporting and then they pick 12, fortunate soldiers who happen to, post the wrong thing on Facebook or more probably. And they get popped up as the sacrificial lambs for the vetting process to show the country that we did our due diligence and we made sure all those National Guard folks were going to behave. I mean, that's an insult to the uniform, in my opinion.
It is. And when they do ask those questions, it sounds a little something like this. Are you now, or have you ever, belong
Right.
to an agency seeking to overthrow the United States government? You're like,
Exactly.
no. Are you now, or have you ever been approached by a Chinese national seeking to, you're like, no. Are you now, or have you ever been a member of an alt-right, conspiracy-minded group? No. It's just ridiculous.
Having been in a group or in the military, you would know that guy. I mean, you'd hope to know. I mean, there's obviously people who slip through the cracks, but you spend so much time together on duty, which guys have their extreme opinions of things. And if it gets out of hand, you self-regulate or you report up the chain of command. You say, hey, whatever you're doing or saying or whatever your motivations are over there, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense right now in the mission we're doing. Or you report it up the chain of command. We self-regulate inside the military. That's what the greatest part about us is that, we're a self-contained unit. We don't need outside vetting because we vet each other as Americans, right? So this whole idea, it was preposterous. And it shows again, we're really beating up the media, but it shows again
they can take it. It's all right.
It's what people key on, right? They key on this fanaticism about, our soldiers, that there would be a pocket of National Guardsmen that were, there to, as a sleeper cell. It's just ridiculous. And it really, that one in particular got me pretty fired up, and she got the brunt of it in some of my text messages. But it was again, just a complete ridiculous idea that was propagated by the media.
Yeah. And honestly, you have bigger fish to fry in terms of what you're going after when you're looking at a division full of people. A division, you've got world-class athletes, you've got PhDs, you've got all kinds of people in there. Nothing's more diverse than a division.
Right.
How many nationalities, how many people who aren't even citizens of the U.S. are in this unit? How many people speak foreign languages as their first language? On and on and on. There's so much diversity in a division. If you're looking for sleeper cells, go look outside of that division. Go look in town. That's where those people are at, for crying out loud.
Oh, and by the way, you have COVID going on too. So
Yeah, and by the way, thanks for being exposed to all that stuff. While we all couldn't go out and eat in restaurants and everything, you guys have been waylaid by that, and that's the kind of service that will look. That's going to go on your file when you get out and you apply for your service connection for your disability. I was exposed to COVID. You don't know what's going to happen next. There's infertility findings now. Infertility is one of the things, and we just exposed a bunch of National Guard people, and I would say, needlessly so, Nick, right? A division full of people for DC. I was in provinces in Afghanistan where we had a light brigade, and I mean like light, like not even a full brigade of people who didn't cover most of the area. A division in DC, it's that, just for the audience, that's 2 orders above in terms of size. That's like an army of people, an actual army. Okay, anyhow, listen. The book is called Guardians. You guys can get it on Amazon. There is the link for it. I've also put the link for Julia's recent book, her biography. So also look for that in the show notes. If you're listening on the podcast side, definitely take a look at that. You can always get Julia's information at juliamaki.com and look for her articles and all those things. Nick, what do you want to promote besides the book?
Nothing, just promote her. She's a talented author, and just Pete, thanks for having us on. It's been a pleasure talking to you.